What's up, Copy Chiefs? If you're listening to my voice right now, I bet you'd like to know how you can join Copy Chief. And if you go to the website right now, you'll see that there is a waiting list. But guess what? I've got something special for you for being a Copy Chief Radio listener. When you go to copychiefradio.com right now, you'll be able to skip the line and join us all inside Copy Chief. So head on over to Copy Chief Radio right now, and you can skip the line and join us.
This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Welcome back, Chiefs, to another edition of Copy Chief Radio, back in your ear holes with more edumacation, Mr. Kevin Rogers.
What's up? What's up? Hey, Jonathan. Good to be back with you, my friend. Hey, this is cool. You know, some of the most popular episodes we've done here in Copy Chief Radio are about story, right? We had Aaron Crocker here teaching us how to use emotional story for health, fitness, reports. We had Henry Bingaman told us the 7 stories that every sales letter needs. That was really cool. And today we're going to continue with that super top quality story usage story learning with our man AJ Silvers, who's a member of Copy Chief and really experienced direct response copywriter. He's also an NLP practitioner. We could do a whole episode on that alone, and I'd actually love to have AJ back to have that episode. But today, we're going to talk about flash fiction. AJ teaches fiction writing, and he's a tremendous fiction writer. We're going to talk about how flash fiction will increase the power of your copy. So, AJ, thanks for being here, brother.
No, thank you. I've been a long-time listener, so really looking forward to sharing some knowledge with everyone listening in.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I hadn't read your fiction until just recently. You sent me over some samples, and man, I was super impressed. There's so much to fiction writing. Would you say it's like a totally different headspace, or similar to copywriting?
I think there's a big overlap in that all good fiction is a form of sales copywriting, in that we're selling an idea, we're selling a world view, and that might be, in a science fiction or a magical fantasy realm, a completely different world. But if you look at any of the great novels, any of the great stories or the great screenplays that get written, they're selling us a particular way of looking at a character or a set of events. So I think the two are far closer aligned than most people experience. And if you think about some of the best, some of the classic swipe headlines, you've already read some flash fiction. And if you're a copywriter and you've written some of these headlines, you've already written flash fiction, perhaps without realizing what you've been doing.
All right, so let's start with the definition of flash fiction. What is that anyway?
With most literature definitions, there's a wide range, but the general consensus is it's a story that's consumed in one sitting. So you could be anything from the urban legend of Hemingway's 6-word story to there's a big sort of Twitter literature where you have to tell your story in 140 characters. But most people tend to focus on things like word limits. You might have a 99-word count story. If you work in the 750 to 500 words, technically it's called sudden fiction. And that's the area I like to work in, because you get enough scope to develop a character without having to resort to the standard sort of setup punch, a bit like the comedy used to do, I imagine. You have the narrative joke, and then you have the one-liner.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think of, you're talking about, 6-word literature, that kind of stuff. But a lot of people define as the perfect joke, "Take my wife, please," 4 words. And it's just because it contains every element of what you would consider a perfect joke. So it's amazing. And it's just a quickly side note. I was watching 60 Minutes was profiling social media millionaires, right? These YouTube kids and Vine stars. And the reporter was saying to one of the Vine stars, come on, 6 seconds? How do you make an impact in 6 seconds? And the kid said, I can make you laugh in 6 seconds. I can make you cry in 6 seconds. I can make you think or take an action in 6 seconds. And the guy said, come on. And he goes, I could do it in 4. And why that struck me was when you're given limitations, you begin to discover how much you can do with those limitations. And so while 6 seconds seems an impossible amount of time to have an impact, to him, he doesn't even need the extra 2 at this point because he's done it so much, right? So
completely agree. I think constraints like a short word count actually liberate your creativity because they force you to make every word count or every second count if you're on Vine, I guess.
Yeah, great point. Okay, cool. So let's talk about flash fiction versus other types of story.
Well, I think one of the reasons I'm a big fan of flash fiction is because it's that concentration. It's the sort of prose equivalent of your haiku in the poetry world. You have no space. Every word has to count. And I was looking up some classic headlines this afternoon in advance of this call. You're probably familiar with the John Caples, probably one of the most swiped headlines. They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, that's flash fiction in a sense. You've created an entire scene. And for me, the power of adding fiction to copywriting, specifically in the sales copywriting, is that facts can be quite isolating. But when you put the fact in a story, we give it context, we give it meaning. And stories have another benefit in that we're used to consuming stories as infotainment, as entertainment. And when we were children, it was how we were taught social norms. So our critical filters tend to switch off when we're reading a story. And incorporating your stories into copy has that same effect. And whether it's, a 100,000 word science fiction novel, or it's a 6-word Hemingway-esque pithy one-liner, in both senses, you're trying to do the same thing. You're trying to move the reader from point A to point B.
Right. Yeah. And suck them into what comes next, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a fantastic book called Wired for Story by Lisa Cron, and she took some brain imagery and applied it to readers as they were going through various fiction experiences. And it's a book I think every copywriter should read, whether you want to write fiction or not. One of the things they found was something that neuroscientists call mirror neurons. So when someone read an account of a story of a particular experience happening, the same neurons fired in their cortex as though they were doing the same event. So you can instantly bypass, as I said, people's sort of objections, critical filters, and induce the experience, the fear of walking up to the piano, or the proud response after you demonstrate that, hey, actually, I can play this thing. And stories, I think, are more powerful than traditional technical orientated copy where you've got feature benefit, because feature benefits, it could be a car brochure. But when you're reading a story, in order to process that story, we have to vicariously relive it. Literally, we recreate that story, which is why I think so much of our leisure time is spent in the cinema, watching Netflix, reading a book, because it's that recreation process.
Yeah, fantastic. So we're actually living vicariously. And when given the opportunity to fill some downtime, that is what we go to primarily. Story. Yeah.
I mean, the Netflix binge addiction, I think, is probably something most people have experienced. And it's amazing. You get to, be the superhero of your choice for the weekend.
Yeah. It's awesome. All right, cool. So let's talk about, as it relates to sales copy, we talked about how they're closely related. How does becoming a better fiction writer help then a copywriter write better copy?
Well, I think there are certain key elements are in a traditional sales copy piece that readers are going to need in order to make the decision to buy. So we need some form of proof. Typically, this is in the form of a testimonial. And if you think about it, a testimonial could be quite bland. I bought the product, it was great. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. But if you put the use of the product into a story, explaining what life was like before, what life was like after. I'm a big fan of using the Amazing Grace motif for testimonials. Once I was lost and now I was found. Yeah. So a copywriter can speak to a couple of customers of a product or service, find out what life was like before, find out an emotional impact of that life, and then how that life was changed by the product or service, and induce in the reader the positive emotions associated not with the product, but with life after the product, which is ultimately, I think, what most people buy. We don't buy a BMW for the utility of moving around. We buy a BMW for how it's going to make us feel about driving the BMW.
Right. And on that note, you shared a great film by BMW in Copy Chief recently. And I love that because it was pure emotion, pure story. And at the end of that 13 minutes, I never felt like they were trying to sell me a car, but I sure as hell wanted the car in that film.
Absolutely. And they made the car the hero in a very subtle way without ramming it down your throat. As you pointed out in the discussion we had, the car versus the helicopter. I mean, initially you have the conflict of what's going to happen. The terrorists hook the car up to the helicopter, and you know that there's going to be a fight. You know the helicopter's going to pull against the car. We're rooting for the car to win. And as you say, it's not an advert, it's a story. We're emotionally invested because we want the car to get away, so the girl in the car gets away. And that's amazing empathy created from something that technically is an advert.
Hey, producer Jonathan here, and I know I'm interrupting the program, but it is for a very good reason. If you are not already a member of Copy Chief, then you probably should be. And if you go to the website right now, you can get on the waiting list and maybe get a spot when we open, or you can do the smart thing. Right now, today, you can join Copy Chief by going to copychiefradio.com and you can skip the line. No waiting list. But I gotta warn you, you'll only have 30 minutes from the time you land on copychiefradio.com to join. And that's so we don't have any time wasters or scragglers. So make sure that you're absolutely ready. Then go to copychiefradio.com today and join.
It's such a bigger way to think about how to connect with people. And someone might say, well, this isn't, it gave no features of the car. And what about the tech heads? Well, the tech heads already know the features of the car, right? The gear heads, they know, they read Car and Driver and they're up on all that stuff. This is for, and to think about, like you mentioned about why we buy sports cars, really has nothing to do with practicality. It's status. It's pure emotion. How does it feel to slide into that seat? What does it represent about your journey through life, where you are today? Maybe you grew up imagining what it might be like to have a BMW and never thinking you actually could. So it's like you said, pure emotion. So it makes great sense that they would invest in a 13-minute really dynamic, high-level James Bond type looking film to sell the car.
And they also embarrassed the Transporter too, because it was a better Transporter than the remake they did. So, you've got a whole generation of people who like the original film, and now people say, oh, I could be Clive Owen, I could have that getaway. That's an awesome way to finish that kind of sentiment. Yeah,
fantastic. That's great. So, all right, so let's, if somebody's listening and they go, okay, great, well, I'm disappointed now because I get the whole feature benefit thing. I'm pretty good at writing bullets because they're a little more practical, or you definitely want some creative and story type flair in a good bullet. But, can we teach someone to be a great creative writer? Is that possible?
It's a great question. I mean, this is one of those debates that rages on in the sort of warring factions in academic universities between the literature department and the creative writing department, the creative writing being a young upstart. My personal belief is, yes, anyone can be taught the creative process. And like any form of writing, whether it's copywriting or content marketing or fiction, it's the same sort of nuts and bolts. You sit in front of your typewriter or your laptop. Hemingway would say you just bleed on it, but you work through the process. If someone's used to writing features and benefits, the same process can be applied to teach them how to write, mini story vignettes. Rather than saying feature equals benefit, you could talk about Jane experiencing life as it is, and then that experience changing because of the product or service. And it's the impact on Jane that becomes the selling point rather than the specific feature or benefit. So if you sort of zoom out from the feature and benefit, say, how would this product be used? What would the classic experience be with the user? A good example of something we're talking about with colleagues today, Slack versus email. For the last 15, 20 years, email's been the driving force of most electronic communications. Slack's one of many different messaging platforms, but it's exploded over the last few years. Right. And once you use Slack, you're never going to go back to team communications via email. So explaining to someone about, it's a message facility, you're auto-connected. There's a whole bunch of technical gumph that no one really cares about. What you care about is my inbox doesn't scare me. I get control of my day. I can be reached or reach people when I need to. It's instantaneous. Actually, it's quite fun. I don't think people ever think of fun and the 6,000 unread emails in their inbox in the same sentence.
Yeah, great point. Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And people love Slack because it is all those things. And people create Slack channel. It's like your own little Twitter universe or something, right?
Yeah. But I think the reason I mentioned Slack is not only is its utility, if you look at the way Slack's been marketed and it's grown to 100 million in revenues a year without pay-per-click advertising, their best adverts were the stories people told other people about how great Slack was. And they didn't say, oh, it's just, Ruby on Rails, whatever the full stack is. I don't know the tech behind it. But people talked about how it changed their life. That's right. A powerful story, because if it changed my life and I'm speaking to you and you've never experienced Slack, you have a good indication how your life is going to be better.
Exactly right. And it's about how will people talk about it to other people, right? Yeah. Because customers are always your best sales team. And if they say, people go, Slack, what is Slack? And they go, oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever. Oh, really? Right? And you're talking, like you said, about essentially a quicker, easier way to email each other in real time. But people don't say that. They don't talk about the functionality of it. They go, oh my God, it's totally revolutionized how we do business. What? Yeah. So, great point. I wish we had time for me to read some of the fiction that you shared with me, The Prostitute and the Priest. It's so good. I could just ask you so many questions about this little story on its own. Is it okay with you if we share this in the show notes? Okay, great. So I just want to make a side note that I want everybody listening to this. AJ, in as a copywriter, it's AJ Silvers. As a fiction writer, you're Damian Silvers, which is your real name, correct?
Yes, one of many pen names. Like most writers, I'm schizophrenic. So,
and so you have different pen names, and you write in different ways and different voices and even genres, I guess, for different pen names.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic copywriting thing. If you understand your market audience, you want to give your audience something they can relate to. So I don't think the average audience of, say, the frontier fiction I write would appreciate the fact that I'm this geeky literature guy from the UK. They'd much prefer it's an author that's representative of who they are and their values and their systems. So I think, for me, from a fiction writing point of view, we do everything we can to reduce any friction that someone might have buying one of our books. Because if they buy one of our books, they're going to buy the other 10 or 20 from that pen name. And that's why we call it a publishing business.
Yeah, good point. And you want to point out that you're a real writer. A lot of copywriters talk about the work of fiction they've got going and maybe someday and all that. But yourself, Ben Settle, a few others are actually published authors, and I always appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's I think the big difference between a writer and someone who writes, especially when it comes to fiction, is that writing is an activity, but being a writer means you can't not write. The stories are kicking and screaming in their heads, desperate to get out, fighting in the queue to be next. That's, for me, the psychology that you normally meet of a writer. I think that's why alcoholism is so popular in this profession, because it's one way of quietening all that hubbub down.
Yeah, great point. All right, tell me about the National Novel Writing Month. What goes on there?
So this happens every November. Obviously, by the time this goes out, it's well underway. The idea is that you put your entire life on hold for November and you crank out 50,000 words, hopefully good words, in a succinct order, and they create a novel at the end of it. It's been going for a long time now. It's really good fun if you're not normally able to discipline yourself to chunk the time out to write. I mean, for me, fiction's the thing that happens before anything else of the day, so it's quite a natural process. But if you've never done fiction before, there isn't necessarily the goal of just creating, the next Moby Dick. In fact, I don't think it could probably be done in 30 days. But the idea of chunking out a period of time, 1 month, at a specific goal, 50,000 words, and then just experiencing what it's like to, as Hemingway said, bleed over your keyboard consistently to the point where you end up with a story that's, worthy of someone else's reading time.
Mm. And so it's sort of like a public accountability motivation tool to get you to finally pump out some actual fiction.
Yeah, I mean, everyone thinks they have a book inside of them. For most people, I think it's just literary indigestion. But NaNoWriMo is an opportunity to actually go out and do it. And there's a huge support community. If you're not a traditional, if you're not a paid writer, it's not something that you normally do, and you've got family commitments, work commitments, you've got to walk the dog, wash the car, all the other minutiae of life, you're never necessarily going to break out the time to sit down and have a go.
Right.
But, I mean, Neil Merton, a good friend of mine, another copywriter and a great fiction writer, last year sat down and did 31-day short stories. So he did a 99-word short story every day for 30 days. I understand the first week was okay. The second week he was entering hell, and he won't talk about weeks 3 and 4. But the output was fantastic. He had a really good book. You can find it on Amazon. And for him, he was saying it was that constriction. Not only was he constricted with 99 words, but he had to do it every damn day.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference. Pressfield talks about this in The Resistance and Turning Pro and The War of Art.
Right.
We turn up and work because of the work, not because we feel like it, because we want to, because that's what professionals do.
Awesome. So that's NaNoWriMo.org, NaNoWriMo.org. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. AJ, where can people find you if they're interested in injecting some serious story power into their copy?
ajsilvers.com, as it says on the tin, fairly straightforward. So I'm thankful that we have a short waiting list, which is always nice to have as a copywriter. And if people are interested in learning fiction, obviously Amazon's a wealth of books on the subject. But I'd suggest, rather than diving off into some sort of cul-de-sac of literary wonderfulness, take the current copy you're working on and look at, where's the story? Can I create a story in the headline? Is my hero, what's the archetype of the story? Bad boy made good, hero returns. Can you weave some narrative elements into your copy? Split test them. I'm confident once you start adding stories to your copy, not only will your clients come back for more, but their customers will be coming back for more. And it'll have a massive impact on the persuasiveness of your copy moving forward.
Great stuff. AJ Silvers, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for these awesome and deep insights into how to become better copywriters through fiction, and particularly flash fiction. Look forward to having you back again.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Cheers.
So, Kevin,
cheers.
What do you have coming up for next time?
Next, our friend April Dykman returns, and she actually may be her first time on this show. She's been on my other show. But she's going to talk about newsletters. As you know, lots of people, you, in fact, Jonathan, have a print newsletter, the Podcast Mogul. She's going to talk about digital newsletters and the sort of hidden power behind them.
Nice. All right. Looking forward to that. And another Copy Chief Radio's in the can. We'll be back with you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Copy Chief Radio. If you like what you heard here and you want more, go to copychiefradio.com.
This is the podcastfactory.com.